I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, April 24th. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Rosado?
Here.
Atack?
Here.
Stark? Here. Chanzit?
Here.
Wolf?
Here.
Salvati?
Here.
Brown? O'Brien?
Here.
Callahan?
Here.
Meitzler? Malay? Ewer?
Here.
Cerrone? And McFadden?
Here. Okay. We have the necessary quorum to conduct business. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for April 3rd and April 10th. Anybody have any questions, comments, corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Stark, second by Ewer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is items to be removed, added, or changed. Do we have anything? All good. Next is matters from the public. Do we have anybody from the public that wishes to address the council on something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Move right on then to item number 5, ordinance 1822, variances for tower signs at Windmill Creek Shopping Center. Alderman Stark?
Okay. April 4th, the Zoning Board of Appeals had a hearing to consider a request for variances from the zoning code 4.407.b.2b to allow 2 replacement tower signs for the Windmill Creek Shopping Center. Both signs would exceed the allowable sign area and one would be taller than allowed. Windmill Creek has properties zoned general commercial and service business. The zoning code limits tower signs to 20 feet in height and 80 square feet in sign area. Crash Champions is taking a leadership role in securing a new tower sign presence for the shopping center property owner. The new shopping center signs are proposed on the existing sign bases along Randall Road and Main Street to replace the existing tower signs that are in need of repair or replacement. The applicant has support of this proposal from the affected property owner's business in the shopping center. The city of the Batavia owns the undeveloped property on Main Street west of Crash Champion. Staff requested and the applicant agreed to include space on each side of the sign for the exclusive use of the owner of this property. Including the space increases the sign area variance request and necessitated the height variance request. So we have the proposed measurements of the signs. The existing height is 21.25 feet. And this was confusing, Joel. Is it the existing height is 21.25 and they want to go to 24?
So there's 2 existing monument signs on the property that they're going to be replacing. So the parentheses are the existing heights of the 2 buildings, the 2 signs. Okay. So what's actually being proposed is on the left without the.
Okay, so 21.25, which is actually shorter.
Yes.
But it's more square feet than the allowed 134.
Correct.
Okay. And the other Main Street sign is 18.4 feet proposed, which is slightly larger than the 18 feet that's existing, and then it would be 150 square feet, which is larger than the 86 square feet that is currently there. So the Zoning Board of Appeals agreed with the applicant's assertion that it's hard to see the properties in the shopping center from Randall Road or Main Street or both. And some properties have no opportunity for having an individual sign that fronts on any street. And so allowing for those larger tower signs to display messages would limit the clutter of having several individual freestanding signs along street frontages. So the Zoning Board of Appeals felt this was a reasonable variance application, and with staff's recommended conditions of approval founded in the affirmative. And so we, as the council, can approve this ordinance as presented, or we can add, remove, modify the included conditions. And so the pros, of course, would be it would allow for replacement to have a presence for all of these businesses. The con is denial would not allow the proposed replacement signs, and the signs that are there now are in poor repair and they need to be repaired, and they don't allow enough sign visibility to the businesses that are there. There's no direct impact in terms of budget. There's no staff impact. And so by a vote of 7-0, the Zoning Board of Appeals recommended approval of this. Earlier today at about 5:30ish, we did receive a memo from Joel, right, with all the signs. Who sent it? Someone sent it.
I sent it.
Drew.
Yes.
Sorry, Drew.
No problem.
We received it from Drew and it showed that it's very close in terms of square footage and height. They're not asking for a huge variance. And so is there any discussion? Does anybody want any more information from Drew about this project? Mark?
I guess the only other question I have is that that's obviously not enough space for all the tenants, at least in that configuration. Is that their planned configuration, or a lot of the signs you see on Randall, you have multiple sizes? Is that just an example?
This is the planned configuration with that amount of space allotted to each of the tenants in terms of assigning spaces. So that's the present configuration that they're proposing.
So if Pal Joey's wants a sign, then they're going to have to come and ask for a sign, or how's that going to work?
So
They have one.
they do have
One
grounds.
I've been by there recently.
And I think that's probably where most of the businesses that are in that property that don't have sign or that aren't on this presented sign do have frontage on Randall or have ground signs already. So I think that's why you don't see more of them on there.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? Marty?
Yeah, I was just going to say the signs would help for the businesses in the back. But also the way that they have redone that building during the day and at night, it really looks good. It stands out really good, especially at night with those vertical up and down lights. That's so much more of a vast improvement over what was there. So it's kind of one of those things where I trust their judgment on it because they've done a bang up job so far.
Bang up Crash Champions?
Sure.
So,
Oh, I know. As
would
a
someone
layout.
like to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Sclavati, second by Chancet. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And so we'll pass that on to City Council. I don't think we need to talk about it.
Consent?
Yeah, consent agenda would be fine. Unless there's some rule about variances that it has to, I don't think so.
I don't think there's.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to item number 6, ordinance 18-24, variances for a building addition at 1141 Morton Street, Spillane and Sons applicant.
Okay, and this one, Mike Spillane and Sons has come to us asking for variance of the second-story addition and awning. And by awning, it's not a temporary awning, it is an actual part of this building. It went before the Zoning Board of Appeals on the same day, April 4th. They requested the variance. It changes, it's a deviation to the setback of 2.69 feet, and it allows an awning to project 4.42 feet into the required front setback. So instead of the 3 feet allowed, there's a deviation of 1.42 feet. The rest of the proposed building addition that's as proposed meets zoning code, does not require variances. The existing residence became non-conforming with the front setback upon the dedication of right-of-way from Morton Street in 1995. Again, this property is at 1141 Morton Street. Let's see. This came out of Zoning Board of Appeal with a vote of 6-0 in approval for the requested variances. So does anybody have any questions about this one? Marty?
This one I just found was relatively interesting because the same setback of 27 feet, about 450 feet away, was on Millview, 702 Millview, Ron and Susan Blackney's back,
Sunroom?
no, the room, the outdoor room.
Yeah, the
indoor
sunroom.
outdoor room. And we granted that because we knew it was going to help improve the neighborhood and the look of the neighborhood. And this one definitely is going to on Morton. You didn't see how bad that whole house was until they removed all the trees. And that's where you see how weird that lot is to begin with, because now it's kind of like, well, there's tons of room, but where the house is situated, it really makes it unique.
The property was subdivided basically around this existing house, and so that kind of creates a lot of what the situation is in terms of where the street is in relation to the building. Although I guess that was already in place, but the dedication of right-of-way created that. The homeowner, working with Mike Spillane, would be removing the porch on the front of the building, which is probably not in the best state, and that actually increases the overall setback situation on this particular property, so.
It looks great based on the blueprints and the drawings, the elevation drawings. It's going to be a huge improvement. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Chansett, second by Callahan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Again, I think this can go on the consent agenda.
Okay, next up is item number 7, discussion on establishing a new service area, or special service area number 62 for Main Street.
Okay. So the question in front of us is, should the city establish a new special service area for Batavia Main Street? The special service area was last approved by the city council on November 18th of 2013. It had a 5-year term with an annual levy that was limited to $40,000. So it's 2018, we're 5 years later, and so Main Street is asking us as a council to change the future maximum levy to $100,000, up from $40,000. It wouldn't be levied immediately. Rather, they would ask for increases by a formal request to the city council prior to the levy being established. And so staff is asking for our direction on this. And it's primarily because before they put any work into this and notify property owners, et cetera, they want to make sure that we're on board with this, or if we want to make changes to it so that they don't do a lot of work and then come back to council and we say absolutely not, or absolutely we should. So this is time now for council to discuss whether or not we think this is a good idea. There's a few things. I talked to Scott about this today. I talked to a few property owners in downtown. The property owners have not been talked to about this yet. And so the 2 property owners I talked to were not in favor of this. So I think that we need to look more closely at the property owners in downtown and the people who are directly affected by the SSA. Further to that, I talked to someone who was part of the initial setting up of Main Street. They told me that Main Street was supposed to be self-sustaining in 10 years, and that 5 years were for the initial to get it up and running, 5 years were to gain traction, and we're now at that time. And so it makes these decisions, it's a value judgment in some ways. In some ways we have to, make a determination what we want to do when it comes to that. A third point that was made to me as I did some additional questioning about this is the Economic Development Committee is something that as council, I don't know if we hear from a lot in terms of what is Main Street doing in terms of economic development for our downtown business owners. And then another thing that was pointed out to me is that none of the current sitting board members for Main Street have businesses in the SSA area. And so that was another thing that was brought up to me. So I'm just putting all those things out there. I have no opinions. I'm not sharing an opinion. I'm telling you what business owners, the 2 that I talked to who are in the SSA, told me today. So I'm just putting that out there. So Scott, is there anything that you would like to add to this, or?
Just briefly, the only thing that we would, you have the letter from Main Street asking for the extension of the SSA. The SSA that's existing expires at the end of this year. They're asking us to create a new SSA that would essentially do the same thing, except they wanted to up the levy from $40,000 to $100,000 and also not have a term. So whether or not that's something you decide you want to do, Main Street representatives are here tonight, and they're certainly going to explain, what their request is. But if you do decide you're going to renew the SSA or create the new SSA to help fund them, one of the things that staff would really like to have happen is to not have a specific time frame for it like we had with this last go-around. The problem is that even if we have a 5-year term, once that expires, we have to go through quite a bit of work with mailings and notices and things like that, and it costs us quite a bit of money to do this every time. So we feel that if you wish to renew this SSA, you always have the ability to rescind the SSA. You can just pass an ordinance and it goes away. So that, you can maybe have something where they come report to you over a period of time or something like that, or that you have a review of it every 5 years, but we would rather it not be an automatic termination of the SSA. We would rather have the ability to, continue it, and then at your discretion, you can terminate it at any time. So that would be our preference as staff, just so we don't have to go through the whole mechanism of creating the SSA. It takes us about 6 months or so to do that, and all the expense and time frame to get it done from staff. So that's the only other thing I wanted to say on that.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Oh, and I just want to clarify, I did not talk to storefront business owners. I talked to property owners who it's on their tax bill, and then they have to recoup it by charging higher rents or paying the SSA. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood it's not like I talked to two storefront people. I talked to people who actually own property. Lucy, you had a question?
I do. How do other main streets fund? I mean, how are they funded? I mean, is there a term? Is it usually funded by the city in as much a large part as this one is?
You know, there's a whole variety of funding mechanisms that are in the Main Street formula, and if you look on the Main Street website, they can tell you how many different towns use an SSA. Some use just general tax levies, some use just memberships. I'm sure Jamie can give you more definition on exactly how other ones are funded, but some are funded through SSAs, some are funded just through member contributions. It's a whole variety of funding mechanisms.
Why was there a limit initially of 10 years?
Well, it was 5 years and then 5 years.
Well, okay,
So
5 years
I think
and
the
5
idea, well, from my involvement on it when we did the second one was, what was talked about is that they wanted to be able to say, okay, after 5 years, we want to evaluate this and make sure that they're ready to self-fund themselves either through membership dues or contributions through events and what have you. So I think that was my recollection of what the idea was at that time. So, but they've also since that time expanded their role. They've done more activities, more events, and that type of thing. So I think that's part of the reason why they're making the ask here tonight.
Nick?
My memory, I was here 5 years ago when this came aboard, and I thought the goal was to become self-sufficient. So while I love the work that they do, I'd be more concerned not about our opinion, but the actual people that are paying the tax, their opinion. So it concerns me to more than double it, allowing that flexibility. So we need to be cautious of that. On the flip side, the next few years are going to be probably difficult on the downtown businesses, and we got to be aware of that with the construction and whatnot. So have varying opinions as often that contradict each other, but I wanted to bring both those things up. But my memory, when we first did it, we talked about 5 and 5 years ago, or is that something that's come up since then, that it's now a 5 and 5?
My recollection, and again, I wasn't here for the first go-round of the first SSA, but as I understand it, was a 5 and 5, and I was here for the second 5 when we did the current SSA.
Marty?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on your memory, because that was we were talking about this next 5 years going into it, trying to be self-sufficient, because that went to how much opposition we were or were not going to receive when it did go out again. And I think John Pitts led the charge as one of the major property owners at the time, that he got them to buy into the fact because they knew what the goal was. They knew what they were spending the money for, and then found some of the errors in the money that turned out, which I think led greater oversight to it, and which the understanding was, let's see where we are in 5 years. And now kind of where we are in 5 years is I really could not make a decision about what we would do on this without having the stakeholders at the table as we're deciding this, because it's ultimately their decision. I would hate to have to spend all the money putting it out to try to go about it to fail miserably, because this is supposed to be for them, by them, and all the self-funding stuff. I think there are, as we're evaluating this, I think there are other programs, kind of to Lucy's point about what are other cities doing. Other cities may be doing main streets, maybe they're doing hybrid Main Street economic development corporations. Some are just doing economic development corporations, where they're doing the public partnership is our economic development would be rolled into their organization as another. Downers Grove does it, DeKalb does it, Montgomery does it, several others. So, and they've had it since 2003 to 6. So you've got a good length of time to see if there's progress, if there is benefits to it, that I would want to have that information to make a more informed decision about what is best for us and maybe see what fits.
Anyone else? Mike?
Has anybody spoken to the stakeholders?
I believe Main Street has had some conversations with them. We have not directly from a staff level, no.
Are they happy with what's been done in the last 10 years?
I'm going to defer that to Jamie because she's obviously more intimately involved in it than we have been.
How old is Main Street? It's older than 10 years, is it? 20 years? I thought so. Personally, I would be opposed to the raise in it. I don't think that would be fair to stakeholders, but I think, they do a nice job and they bring a lot of people and a lot of people to our downtown. There's a lot of energy coming. I would definitely keep it the way it is. I appreciate what you have to say about keeping it open, open-ended, and we can close it whenever we want it if we didn't feel it was being successful. But I think Jamie works very hard at it, and I think they are highly successful. So, but I'd like to, before we started raising the rates, we'd want to speak and hear from the stakeholders. But I think what you're looking for is direction just to proceed, and I would definitely, give that direction.
Scott?
Well, I think that one of the things that we should look at too, as opposed to looking at as an expense, is as an investment. So, I mean, I've done a lot with Main Street. I've seen what they've done. I think we need to talk. Do think we need to talk to stakeholders. That's the right thing to do. One, I'm curious as to why people got their nose out of joint about not being on the board. Were they upset about not having?
It's the SSA affects a finite number of business
Right.
owners in downtown, and none of them are represented by the board.
Okay.
And so that was the,
Okay.
so.
Well, we can. Okay. Well, we can let them answer that. So, but my question is, as an investment of $40,000 a year, what is the return that we're getting? And so I think that's the legit question.
Right.
And and I'm sure they can bring some numbers to it, because some of the things that they've done, I mean, Oktoberfest, just jumping off my head, is insane. How much it's grown in the last couple of years. The farmers market. There's a lot there. So all that being said, they're doing wonderful things, but we do need to make sure we're doing this the right way. The Economic Development Corporation interests me. That really does. Wisconsin's doing something like that with a hybrid. I think, for me, this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but the economic development of this community is incredibly important to me, and I'd love to see it codified a little bit more. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Dan?
In general, do SSAs have a negative or positive effect on saleability of property? I ask that because my brother had a townhome that was in an SSA, and there was a neighboring townhome development that did not have an SSA, and he found that he had a lot of trouble, and his neighbors had a lot of trouble selling their property because that they were in an SSA.
Right.
Now, the way this one is proposed, we know what the current cost is, but for the potential to increase that cost at an unknown number, it seems like that would have a very bad effect on business property moving downtown. Am I off base, or is that a concern?
Well, it depends on what the SSA is for. I mean, we have plenty of dormant SSAs, throughout our subdivisions, and we don't levy any tax on a lot of those. So, those obviously are just backup in case the homeowners association doesn't maintain certain things. We do have a couple of active ones that maintain detention ponds, and their levies are relatively small. I mean, $6,000 over maybe 200 homes, so it's a minuscule amount. When you look at the scope of the area here, $40,000 divided up amongst all those property owners, that dilutes it also. So it's not a huge levy. So it really depends on what it is. Some of the properties that you may be talking about are things like in Yorkville, where they have funded infrastructure that was paid for by the SSA. Right. And the problem with those situations is that when somebody moves in there and they get a tax bill of $200, their first property tax bill is $200, and the next year it's a $20,000 tax bill, and they're like, what happened? And that's to pay for their share of the infrastructure. So those are the ones that are really problematic and have been problematic when governments and other associations try to fund infrastructure through an SSA.
So that's not necessarily congruent here, it wouldn't necessarily have a...
I wouldn't construe this as being like that, no. Okay. No, this is not a huge amount of money, really.
Anyone else on the council have anything to say? And then if not, Mike?
Yeah, and this is a budget item anyway, am I correct? Every year we
have a levy every year and budget for that, yes, correct. And if you remember, those of you that may or not remember, because of the overlap with the TIF district and the special service area, we kind of have to do some financial gymnastics to figure out the exact $40,000. Some of it comes from the TIF, some of it comes from the SSA, so that we don't over levy. And we have to, now that we've been aware of that, we have a good idea of how to do that. But
we did that one year, didn't we?
We did that when this new SSA was formed. We did that, so we actually had an overpayment. We didn't actually bill property owners for the first 2.5 years of that SSA because we were playing catch up from the TIF revenues that we had.
Mayor Schuelke, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to throw my hat on the subject and say that Main Street, in my experience, has been a tremendous asset to this community. If you think back to where we were before they were created, we had the Chamber of Commerce, and I will tell you that the Chamber of Commerce has grown equally as strong as Main Street during the years when the two of them have kind of worked tandem together very successfully. And I remember when this was first created, there was some predictions that one was going to outdo the other, or one was going to sink the other, or one. That has not, for whatever blessing, been the case here, and both of them have worked very, very strongly together. And I think in some respects it's allowed the Batavia Chamber to focus a lot of their attention on the industrial section of the town, where, needless to say, with all the moving parts that we have out there on various issues, we need to have that communication and strengthen as they have done. So I feel very blessed by having both organizations in town working together. I mean, if you just look at what happens in this town on Saturday mornings through the fall, summer, and winter on River Street, and as Alderman Savati has already mentioned, everything from the dinner down the middle of River Street to the Oktoberfest to the Easter egg hunt to the Valentine or Halloween party. I think it speaks for itself that it certainly has brought a new lively sense to this town that probably we didn't have before. And it's certainly, I think, also brought a whole bunch of people who were kind of camped out in the neighborhoods and weren't doing much. Suddenly Main Street, along with the chamber, gave them a purpose and an idea to become participants in activities in town. And I mean, if you just go and see the commitment, if nothing else, that this organization does to enhance the lives of small children with all these parties and activities that they do, not only do you get the parents, but you get a lot of pats on the back from the grandparents who like what they see going on here. So I just think it's a very positive creation that we've done here, and I'd hate to see us turn it in some direction that wouldn't be as forward moving.
Scott? Or sorry, Dan, I looked right at you and said the wrong name.
I have a philosophy question for you. Given that the work of Main Street is kind of an extension of our economic development, do you see benefit to having this type of work done in-house, or do you see benefit to having this work remain an independent organization?
I think there's something to be said by doing it independent as long as you have the staff you have there now. I could see that you get the wrong personalities in here and things could go in a different direction. The ones we have right now are right on as far as working with the staff and myself and the city, and I think it's a great partnership. So I would, as long as we got this staff here, I would not be standing here saying we should change this thing. But if we could get some other group of renegades in here, I may say, well, it's time to pull the funding and shut the door. But that's
that's kind of why I asked that, because it would be interesting. Jamie could actually be a city employee and could be working for the Economic Development Department if you changed your philosophy on how this organization
Well,
is run.
I think it speaks well for the organization that they are kind of a quote-unquote independent voice within the city. And they're not sitting there with myself or Laura or any of the city council or anybody has their hand on them saying, well, this is what you're going to say. And so I think there's some businesses that come in and find that as a asset, that they're not under the eyes of the city They may want to suggest a new idea and explore some new thing, and they feel free that they can do that and not immediately think the city is going to slam the hammer on.
No, and that's key to my decision on what kind of funding they should receive. If they were part of the city, I would think that we should subsidize everything, and they shouldn't have to do as much fundraising. But if they're going to be on their own, it does make sense for us to make contributions to make sure that they're sustainable, knowing that they continue with their fundraising activities. So, thank you for the philosophy.
Mike, you had a...
Yeah, and just to the mayor's point, I think, the hub of every community and the heart of every community is its downtown. And Jamie and her crew have done an excellent job. And like I said earlier, bringing energy to our downtown, bringing people to our downtown, bringing the residents to our downtown. And I just think businesses are doing well with that. We've invested a lot of money in our infrastructure on streetscapes and things, and they employ the streetscape with the farmers market, and they use all the infrastructure we've brought in, and they're using that to bring more people in. I think they're doing well for us, and I would always support them in that regard.
Marty, you had a question, comment?
Kind of another philosophical question, though. Should we not be deciding who's there? Because it should be about the organization.
Right.
And what we're trying to figure out is how much do we fund the organization? And that should be the groundstone, because that's going to decide whether or not it ultimately succeeds, which is what we all want this to do. We all want it to be around forever. And to the mayor's point about where it's competing with the chamber, they're partners, but it's an unequal partnership right now because there is a little bit of subsidization with the SSA, but they have more membership to pull from. So where is that balance that we have to figure out? Because it's great on a partnership of personalities, but the two organizations have different missions, different ways to go about it. It's just we've lucked out that they've cooperated so well. Mm-hmm. That could all fall apart with new change in leadership over here or the other place, but we shouldn't be focusing what we're doing with a return on investment on personalities, but what the actual investment is, and is that being met? That's why it's much easier. Then you can take out the personalities and go, well, I'm going to give them money because I like them. Somebody else comes in, I'm pulling money because I don't like you.
True.
That's patently unfair.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You think anyone's doing that?
No, that's what we're saying. No, that's what we're saying. We're trying to step back and look at it from what is Main Street? What are they doing, regardless of who's there? Are they fulfilling a mission? Are they fulfilling a purpose? Is the money that we're spending making a difference? If you can answer yes to that, it doesn't matter who's running it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Laura.
I just wanted to point out one of the other attributes of Main Street that the city staff very much appreciates, and that's acting as an ombudsman for the downtown businesses and identifying areas where needs aren't being met. And while we have many conversations with downtown businesses, Main Street is right out there on the street having conversations with those businesses every day, and we really appreciate the feedback that they're able to provide because of those conversations.
Thank you. Okay, so the council has had a discussion, and so now I think I see Rob lurking around back there. If you'd like to, you're right behind the pole, but I kept going, is that Rob Hollis? So if you would like to.
Yeah, just some clarifications and context, right? So first off, Dan, to your point, one of the things that Main Street really does bring, and to Laura's point also, is we act as a liaison, right? And one of the things that we're able to do is bring an army of volunteers to lots of things that go on, and events and things that benefit the town. And that can't be done through the city, right? That does need a third party. And the value of that alone is pretty significant. I mean, we try to put numbers on it, but it's really hard to put numbers on. And those are all people not only just participating, but they become really active members, and they care about downtown in a way they probably didn't before. So to answer those questions, I want to make it really clear, we're not asking for $100,000, right? So the triggering event here was the fact that, talking to the city and such, that we'd prefer not to go through this process every 5 years, but there's things in the SSA that says it's limited to the 40,000 as a cap, right? We do see some things that are coming our way, the Washington project, other development projects. History tells us that puts a real burden on Main Street, right? And really as a liaison between the businesses that are affected by the development going on.
Can you explain how, Rob?
Yeah, so.
Because
so
throw it out there, but
right. So what happens when you get a big project like that, right? So parking's affected, the traffic's affected, everything's affected. So we really dig in to help those businesses, put people, in those businesses, make sure that they're open, do marketing plans, do special events, do other things that, tend to offset the negative impact of what's going on with development, right? We're also there, as Laura said, on the street, listening, right, and getting the feedback about how the city, how Main Street, how other organizations can help them stay in business. Because it is going to be a real challenge, especially for those businesses on a river. Assuming that the Washington project or whatever subsequent project comes behind it, if for some reason that doesn't happen. So the triggering events were not wanting to do this every 5 years and the cost and the effort behind that, the cap, and knowing that we could need additional resources, staff resources primarily, maybe some investment around marketing. And that's the reason we're asking for the cap to be raised. We're not asking for any more money. It's if, in fact, we're finding that that need exists in our downtown with our business owners and our property owners, that we could come to council and say, hey, we think we need another part-time person to do these things, or we need a part-time person, some funds to do some marketing to help keep these businesses vibrant and in business, helping the property owners so they don't lose tenants. So that's the context on why we're asking for the change and the potential levy. We're not asking for anything today. We're healthy, right? One of the other things that I want to put into context was, so I joined Main Street about 8 years ago. And I think our budget at that time was about $120,000 to $140,000, if I remember right. And it's a partnership, right? And regardless of which community you look at and how they fund, it's always a partnership, and it's property owners, the city, and Main Street, right? How it's funded varies. Here we were at that time, it was kind of a one-third. There were three, legs of the stool, so to speak. And the city was funding about a third, and the property owners about a third, and then Main Street was raising about a third. This year, our budget is about $320,000, okay? And all of that extra money has been raised by Main Street through fundraising, sponsorships, our own efforts, and it all gets reinvested back into the community, right? So the other piece that I want to make sure that you're aware of is we feel like we're kind of capped in how much more fundraising and how much more revenue we can generate organically through Main Street efforts, through sponsorships and events and the things that we do to raise money. So that leaves us, if there is demand on the organization, we don't feel that we can generate the revenue to take care of that demand, and that's why we're asking for the increase. Right.
Is there a reason the increase has to be so dramatic?
No. It's, so the reason where we came up with the number is twofold. Number one, that was actually the original request way back, I think, before this 10-year period. The second is the outside, if we figure out what a half-time to a full-time, person would be and some extra expenses, yeah, it's about another $50,000. I mean, it gets to that $100,000 pretty quick. Mm-hmm. But again, it's completely at your discretion if you ever decide, yeah, it's worthwhile to invest those funds. We're just asking that the cap be changed because we're going through the process of changing the SSA anyways.
What happened when Main Street went from one director to a director and another director? Because, you know, it's been, what, 4 or 5 years now? That we increased this, or you increased the staff.
Right.
You doubled the staff.
Right, best decision we ever made.
Okay.
Right, so, they work wonderfully together, but I can tell you the reason that we've gone from contributing, $40,000 or $50,000 in funding to, what's 150 or whatever the math is because of the second person. And, Kathy was brought on board to really focus on the sponsorships and the events and help us with the fundraising aspects. So she has more than paid for herself. And allowed us to do so much more than we could ever do before. So it was the best investment, in my opinion, that Main Street's ever made.
One more question. When it comes to the SSA, the SSA area is a very finite piece of property in town. So how do you justify that the property owners in the SSA area wind up funding that $40,000 and other businesses that are outside of the SSA get advantages of that?
So we could ask the city to fund the difference, right? I mean, so today that's the way it is, right? It's a city, it's SSA, and it's Main Street. The judgment was that it's probably easier to ask of a potential cap on the SSA for a couple of reasons. It gets spread, but we're also, if we need the additional funds, we do believe that the development that would happen here would actually fund a great deal of that, or maybe all of it, right? So that's part of the reason. I don't think that we're going to need to come to City Council and ask for additional funding for some other reason other than the impact of development that's immediately in our downtown. Right. So the idea is, what we're hoping is the way, however the TIFs and the SSA, et cetera, work, that if we need to come to City Council and say we need more funding because that this project over here may be the one that's generating the additional revenue that isn't there today.
Scott?
So back when the bridge was being built, there was a significant marketing effort done both through Main Street, the Chamber, and the city. Was that a line item? Do we know from before your time, but a line item in the budget for marketing to help those businesses? Because if what I'm understanding is you're thinking Main Street would lead the charge in terms of helping market, helping those businesses, maintain their sanity while this development goes in. Is there dollars, that we're thinking that we would be allocating towards that down as this starts to ramp up?
We did with River Street, didn't we, Mike?
I think we took that out.
I'm responding.
Don't. The question was to Laura.
I'm unaware of what money was allocated either for the bridge development or River Street.
Scott, do you have an answer to that?
I don't recall. I think there was some marketing that engineering was doing as part of that. I know they had a whole brochure with the Bridge Information Group or something like that. They had a whole big binder and things like that for tips on what to do and all that. So there was something that the city did. I don't know the exact amount of money that was involved in that. One thing, since I'm up here, I wanted to clarify the ask that they have for the $100,000. That is the cap on the special service area. So similar to like One Washington Place, that we have a cap on that special service area. That doesn't mean we're going to levy all of that. That's just the ability to levy it if that's what the city council wishes to do. So keep that in mind when you're discussing that.
Thank you. Alan?
I have a question on that question of the cap. How would we increase that? Would that have to be done on a yearly basis? Does that have to go back out and notify the public on it? What does it take to do that? Because it's not like they can say, okay, in 6 months, we're going to have construction start here and we need to add somebody for 6 months. Would we be able to respond to that? Or would we be able to do anything like that?
It would be just like the budget. We'd have to levy it every single year, so it would have to be sometime in, October or so that.
Right. If it was over a 5% increase, you'd have to have a public hearing, so
Okay.
you would have to have notification in time to have that.
Because that's the other thing is, I mean, if we're going to make a jump from 40,000 and say they want another 50 on it, I think, one, we have to have the property owners back in here before we make a decision like that. And two, I just want to know that the reality of it is they can't say, okay, 6 months from now, we need somebody. We can't come up with the money in 6 months.
Right. And then the levy has to actually come in too, on top of that, so, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Rep? Marty?
Just along to Scott, we're saying that it wouldn't be $100,000 all the time.
Correct.
But isn't that how are we going to explain that to the property owners? Because like the West Town, when we were discussing the 8 to 15, they're only going to see that we're going to build 15 units no matter what.
Right.
Selling it to the property owners, we may not do 100, but it's always lurking that $100,000. So they're going to have to, if they're reasonable business owners, is plan on a yearly basis for the 100,000. If they're just that's what I would do. I would bank on 100,000 or my portion of that 100,000 every year. And if it wasn't, then that's money that I now have. But to not prepare for it, I think would be a little more short-sighted. So trying to figure out how to explain it in a way that, yeah, we might not need it, but if we do, you better be prepared for it. Because to Alan's point, we're not going to be able to turn on a dime on it.
Right. Yeah, I think there's going to be adequate time to put people on notice that we're going to, increase the levy between the public hearing and the newspaper notices that we have to do and everything else as part of that. We have a lot of SSAs out there that are dormant that we don't have any levy on. So, and some of them could levy a substantial amount of money. If we had to replace a detention pond and the homeowners association doing that, that is a, big number that could potentially be out there for some of these SSAs. But we don't do it. I mean, obviously it's, we'd rather have the homeowners association do that and everything else. So, I think there would be adequate notice to people to let them know. I don't think that they have to assume that we're going to do $100,000. I think we've been very fiscally responsible as a city. And I think that, if we were going to do that, I think we would probably start talking about it way before we would do the levy and say, you know what, Main Street needs to have this 100,000 SSA, but before we even think about it, we want to have community meetings and discussions and all that before we even, think about going down that road. That would be my opinion on it.
And I think that's why we're wanting to have the discussion with the stakeholders at the table first, so that it's not a big surprise that they will support it at 40, 50, 100,000, so that their buy-in is at 100,000 all the time. That we don't have the dormant SSA that's now going to go live in Nick's ward, and this place is packed with people, and it's just set up for failure. And we don't want to make sure that we're harming Main Street by setting something up for failure where you don't have one of the main funding sources just killing it.
Right. Yeah, and I think from the standpoint of the ultimate levy, whatever the request is going to be or whatever the city council grants, in regards to that, it should be enough where we don't have to go back and redo the SSA. Because if we say we're going to just put it at 50,000, and then 5 years from now they say, you know what, we really need 60,000, we have to start the whole process of creating that special service area all over again. So, once we create it, that's kind of cast in stone, and we can't change that. So,
Alan?
With the amount that's levied today, when Washington Place gets built, that's included into that. And so the levy would actually drop on each property owner to maintain the same amount.
Except for one Washington,
Except for one Washington would come into it.
Yep, because it would all be proportionate based on equalized assessed valuation, right?
Alan, did you have more?
That's what I wanted to.
Dan?
Is it, Rob brought up a good point about the formula. Does staff have an opinion on the formula we're using to determine where the money comes from? Is it possible that if we raise the SSA, we might be taxing the property owners inside the SSA too much for the benefit that the whole community might be receiving? Does it maybe make sense for the city to put in another 20 and take 20 off of the SSA? Is it time to look at that formula, or does staff have an opinion?
I don't think we have an opinion about that. I think that's really a policy decision for the council to decide. If you think you should pay for it through general funds as opposed to special service area, that's something that you would need to decide.
Weren't you a self-funding proponent the last time we had this discussion?
If the benefit is being received by the entire community, and we're entering a time where it would be foolish to close the door on Main Street, they need funding from that.
Mike. Rob, one of the questions, if the business owners were to come before us, if we brought them all to the table, and a downtown business owner said, what have you done for me lately in terms of economic development?
We'd love to have that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that probably is a good conversation to have because again, it's that thing where it's not the storefront owners, it's the people who own the blocks of property that are not around here. And so those are the people that have that.
We're always going to get objection from some of the property owners that just really aren't active downtown.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at the value we bring in several different ways. If we were to equate it to what the city would have to do in terms of staff to do what we do, we are a bargain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are a fraction of the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And we self-fund a bunch of it. So from that perspective, it's a flat no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand that not every property owner is going to see it that way, but I think the ones that are really active in the downtown and the ones that are down here themselves and have a real concern for their tenants, I'm completely confident that they get that. But we'd love to have that conversation.
Mike, you had something?
That was my question. How do you sell it to the people, to the property owners who don't have any business in downtown? How do you sell it to them?
No.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point, and I think that's part of what the council needs to decide is, like I said, we're not asking for $100,000. If this is triggered by the fact that we're changing the SSA, and if we don't put a higher cap on it now, then we could find ourselves in a precarious position should we need additional funding. But I would say that the council needs to look at that, whether it should be maybe part the city and part the SSA or some other formula. And we're not suggesting really what the formula is. We put it all on the SSA because that's what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, that's, I think, your discretion and your decision.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, did you have comments to make?
Well, I just wanted to speak to the fact that we're bringing this to you guys first. And the reason was because it's like a lot of your processes, this is the first step in the process. So coming to you guys, having a little bit of the conversation, because just like Marty said, how do we explain it to the property owners and the business owners to get them to understand? Well, we want to make sure you guys are kind of looking at it this way, and this is a good direction to head. Mm-hmm. Then Main Street will set up meetings with the property owners so we can speak to them and answer all those questions directly to them. Mm-hmm. If we went to them first, there would be a million things and potential upheaval and confusion. So this is the first step that we were directed to do in the process, so we're following the process. Mm-hmm. That's why. Mm-hmm. I think you asked a question about outside of downtown businesses. So we really tried, Rob spoke to, our part of the funding with sponsorship. We really try not to double hit up our downtown businesses as much as possible. Our downtown businesses are small businesses, smaller businesses than a lot of our industrial and Randall Road businesses. Not that they're not small businesses. Mm-hmm. They all have the same opportunity to sponsor, but our downtown businesses are automatically members, unlike a chamber who they pay in to be members. The property owners are paying in to be members, so we give that to their business owners who are leasing from them. So it's kind of a trickle-down effect. So outside of the downtown, let's say Gerald Subaru pays in to sponsor. That helps us fund what we can do to bring down an active audience for those business owners, which then gets people in front of the storefronts, mm-hmm. which then leases the property owners' spaces for them.
And that's a good explanation, Jamie, because that was my point in terms of, okay, so you've got the SSA that really hits hard on the downtown business, but what about all the members that are outside of the SSA area? How do they contribute? And that's that sponsorship piece of the puzzle.
And that shouldn't be understated because I don't know what the actual data is, but I can tell you that I think virtually, if not all of our large sponsorships are outside businesses from downtown that are looking to market to all those people that Main Street helps bring downtown. That's part of why it's so successful. But, Gerald and Oldie and Gale's Jewelers and Joyce Body Works and Funway, I mean, we're outside of the service area. And we all make major contributions in terms of sponsorships. And we're getting sponsorships that we had never dreamed of being able to get before.
Well, we're able to get $8,000 from Sam Adams. That isn't, we're not harassing Missy at the tea tree for $250 that she doesn't have because she's not taking a paycheck yet. We don't want to do that to our small business owners. Our downtown business owners that we want to see survive. We want to do that to Sam Adams. We're okay with that. The other thing that I know, like just in the discussions, the comment about no downtown property owners or business owners on the Main Street board, it's completely false. Number one, we've tried so hard to get a downtown property owner on our board and none of them will come on. Someday I'm going to just like swap roles. I'm going to be a downtown property owner. I'm going to be on the board. But we do have Jeff Matter, who is a downtown business owner. Technically, his dad's a downtown property owner. John Hamill. Heather Koshin is a downtown business employee. Who else? I'm trying to think. I just know that those ones popped into my head. So there is representation. So I think that's really important to note, too.
Thanks for clearing that up. I'm just going based on the list of the notes I took.
Well, and that's the thing, not
That's why I brought it all up,
going
because
on.
you guys are here to be able to refute it and talk about it. Anyone else from the council have any questions? Any direction we want to take? Do we want to table this and get more information? Dan Chance.
I do have a question for Jamie since you're right there. Do you have an opinion on a sunset for the city's contribution at some point? Be it 20 years, be it 5 years, be it whenever?
I think that our value to both the city of Batavia and to the property owners in the downtown is more important than a sunset clause. If you look, and I can get numbers, and by the time we do more presentations, we can have more numbers, but I mentioned it to Rob, the city of St. Charles contributes $200,000 to their downtown partnership. They also have a chamber and a CVB. So they have 3 entities focusing on all of that in their city, and they contribute so much. And other cities do the same thing. So I don't think there should be a sunset clause. I think it's actually kind of silly. I get where the conversation had stemmed before, but I think the value is greater than the nominal amount that's taxed to each individual property in downtown.
Anyone else? Okay. So, what do we do? What direction are we giving staff? Do we need any more information? Do we need any more anything? Obviously, there are alternatives, so we can direct staff to begin the creation of this SSA 62 with a $100,000 maximum levy and indefinite life. We can direct staff to go in a different approach. We don't have to create an SSA at all and let the current SSA lapse. And so the pros are establishing the SSA would allow for continued funding of Main Street via the SSA tax levied on the downtown property owners. The cons, the SSA taxes downtown property owners more than other property owners in order to partially fund Main Street operations. The budget impact, the cost of establishing the SSA will be paid for by the city unless these are to be paid by Main Street and incorporated into the SSA funds. This ran over $1,300 for the mailing and publication costs alone for SSA 57. And staffing impact, staff time will be expended for a number of hours in preparing ordinances, publishing notices, and sending out mailings for the SSA. And so this current SSA expires at the end of the year. I think I saw it was November. We need to approve a new SSA by November to ensure continued funding for the SSA tax. And so staff is just looking for direction on whether or not we proceed Elliot?
I think we need to hear from the property owners before we can move on this. I think we need to. So I would recommend, we either slate it for a month from now so we have a chance to get in front of them and get some direct feedback, get them in here ideally. But I can't see giving direction to push on the SSA and get it charging forward just yet. So,
Marty?
Would that $1,300, how much would it cost to get to the property owners to come to a meeting so that, and not with a meeting with us, this kind of formal, but how do you set up a meeting so you're getting a feel for what the majority of them are thinking? Because while we may agree or disagree on a sunset clause, they are in the driver's seat for that. And if they say they want a sunset clause or it goes down in flames, then there's going to have to be a sunset clause. If they say we're going to support it up to a certain dollar amount to get that 51%, I think we need to have that conversation. How much do you believe in this organization to keep it in your best interest, and make sure that they know what their benefits are, make sure and have them make the value judgment, because if this is a partnership between the city, Main Street, and the business owners, it has to be their thoughts and opinions are weighed just as equally, and then we sit around and figure out how do we accomplish what I think we all want to accomplish, which is maintaining Main Street.
Drew?
Well, I do think we need stakeholder input, certainly. But one of the things that has occurred to me as we're sitting here, we've heard from Main Street and how much more they've got in the game by all their fundraising and sponsorships and things like that. Now we're talking about what we do with this SSA, which is potentially saying, hey, downtown property owners, this thing's growing, we want you to kick in a little bit. I think we're in a tough spot when they turn around and look at us and say, okay, this is so important. These guys have more skin in the game. You're asking us to put more skin in the game. If you guys think it's that important, what are you putting in? And I think what Main Street does is fabulous and is a benefit for the entire community and not just the downtown business owners. So I don't think it would be unreasonable. I think it probably would help us in the long run if we took a hard look at saying, what are we going to do ourselves to contribute that? And that kind of brings a little more equality to the situation where we're not asking for a disproportionate amount from them. We're spreading it out a little bit. We're maintaining our support for something that's a valuable community resource.
Mm-hmm. Mike?
I think Drew just hit the nail on the head there. He's exactly right. I mean, we need to be thinking about what we think we should put into it also, additional funds, because the downtown property owner is going to say just what Drew said. What about you guys? And that's, I see that happening. I was just going to say it myself. So I think we all need to start talking about how much we want to contribute.
Just a kind of an aside question that popped into my head is, would we consider having an outside, Chris Aston, I can't remember, is economic development consultant. Do we consider that part of our contribution to the whole process? Scott?
Well, that's going down where I'm heading right now. And that is, because we want to support Main Street. We want to look at that. We're talking about kicking in more dollars. I really want to look at an EDC. I want to formalize that. I want to see what the benefits are. I want to investigate it because Main Street does wonderful things promoting our community. And that's directly tied to economic development. And I think we're missing out on some synergy in that by having that formalized corporation. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I think that we really, really need to look hard on. And what does that look like?
Scott, for those on the council who aren't completely familiar with that, can you explain a little bit more about what ADC is?
Well, sure. Economic Development Council is basically an outside independent organization that basically is your sales arm for the community. It is out there moving. And so, Marty said Montgomery has one. Where else? I was looking at
Downers.
Yeah, Downers Grove has one.
Aurora had one, but they decided to bring it in-house again.
Right, and so there's advantages to it. I'm sure there's cons to it as well. I think we need to investigate that. I know Wisconsin has a model where they're actively supporting the Main Street effort there as well. So I think this is something that this has always been near and dear to my heart in terms of how we're out there moving and shaking and beating the bushes and getting people to invest in this community. It's all tied together. It's all tied together. So I think it's something, as we're looking at what we're going to kick into the kitty here, if we do, we need to take a step back and look at how we're doing this.
Dan?
I had a question regarding the logistics here. If we went ahead and said yes to this thing tonight, procedurally, doesn't if 51% of the landowners say we're not for this thing, they can kill this whole deal?
Yes, this type of an SSA is subject to what's called a backdoor referendum. So if 51% of the owners and 51% of the registered voters in the area sign a petition and submit it to the city, then that kills the SSA.
So then, Marty, to your point, if you're looking for a way to pull them, why don't we have Main Street propose something that the majority of Main Street property owners agree with?
Right, that's what we're saying. That's what I'm saying. You're in agreement.
I would definitely agree with that.
I agree with that, but I just want to also say, when we're sitting here, we're not just sitting here saying, oh, what are they going to put in the SSA? What is Main Street doing? We just invested a ton of money for that downtown in the next 3 years of what we're putting in for that downtown, and that's not the first thing we've done. We have grants. We do already are doing economic development and trying to boost downtown, so I didn't want that to come across like we're just sitting back, putting it on their backs, so.
Right.
Yeah, I believe our contribution is about $40,000 a year, not including, like-kind services for police and fire and public works and that type of thing. So, we do have a pretty substantial, I think we're one of the biggest contributors, correct? Yeah. So.
Yeah. Without the SSA. Yes.
Is there any way to calculate how much sales tax revenue that particular portion of our town generates on a yearly basis? That might be a question.
Yes, but I don't think we can tell you that.
Okay.
Well,
Maybe aggregated.
If we have one large taxpayer, it might make it difficult.
We have certain confidentiality rules for the state and all that, so.
So from what I'm hearing, and just to summarize and get this so that we can come to some resolution, are we asking staff to explore the Economic Development
Corporation.
Thank you, Economic Development Corporation, before we move any further on this?
I would like.
No, I think we're looking more towards the process of getting feedback from the SSA, aren't we? From stakeholder petition.
Should we be doing those two
I think
things
we all have
concurrently?
support.
Walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think we need to do both. I think there's value in doing both. I think there's value in doing both. If we're going to make a good decision, if we're going to make the right decision for the long-term play here, I think there's value in exploring both.
Okay, so direction to staff would be to please explore the Economic Development, Laura?
Corporation.
The Economic Development, Laura?
Scott, a notice to the property owners and the opportunity to attend a meeting and provide the city council with their opinion on the matter as part of the establishment of the SSA.
Right.
So I'm wondering if doing it twice would be redundant.
Yeah, and when we did this last time, Main Street actually conducted some meetings with the business owners and property owners. I think at the library we had it, and so they had kind of informational meetings with them before we went down that road. So they did do that. So maybe that's if you wanted to get the input from them, that might be the way to do it, is to have them have another informational meeting before we start going down the road and doing that again. So.
Robinson.
I see Rob on the run again.
Yeah, no, so we're happy to do that, but what I'll tell you is we're going to get about 8. and it'll be the 8 that are going to be really negative. I mean, that was our experience last time. You're not going to get the property owners in one room in one evening. So, and there is a process in place. I mean, if 51% say no, then you kill it. But we're not trying to cut stakeholders out of this by any stretch, and happy to meet with any and all. But I just want to, having a meeting for them is not as productive as it might sound.
Hey, Rob, welcome to the club.
Yeah, you live this every week, I know.
So then, backtracking a step and a half. So the first direction is the Economic Development Corporation. Finding out more information in terms of how that works as another arm of economic development in Batavia. The second part is making a decision on the cap and the unlimited time frame for the SSA. And so do we have enough information to direct staff to start putting that in place? The SSA is expiring, so we have to, the framework for an SSA should be put into place. The numbers could be determined at a later date, right? We don't have to say to you, fill in 100,000 in unlimited term.
We have to publish a notice for what the levy is going to be in unlimited term and whatnot, but, certainly you can change that midstream before you approve the final ordinance.
Okay. So I guess direction would be to start the framework of that. And then we can base the dollar amounts on, that's the tough question.
Are we making a commitment to hold the line?
I don't know.
As a group, do we have consensus to hold the line at 40 at least? Yeah?
Yeah.
I feel like the return is way more than what we could ever do in-house. As they've stated time and time again, the amount of people that they have just as volunteers that can show up for anything they want to do is way beyond what we can organize. We have staff that can only do so much here. There's no way, even if we were to go outside and hire somebody to come in and do this, that for the $80,000 we contribute through taxes and through the SSA each year, that we could ever get that in return. Even one or two of the events, we'd eat that up.
I have a question, and I don't want this to sound, so I'm a business person through to the core. And one of the things that I've always wondered is it our right as a council, since we're funding this through tax dollars as well as a city contribution, to be able to see and review the financial statements for Main Street? We get an overview of it. That would be great. I mean, I never wanted to ask because I never was sure if it was our place. So, but that would be great if
we present them at our annual meeting.
Okay, that would be great.
Everybody who attends.
That would be great, Jimmy, because we see when Pat came in and he showed us the pie chart and showed us where the stuff goes. But it would be great if we could actually, that helps fortify decisions when you have actual numbers.
Okay, let's just get to it. So we tell staff $40,000. If we need to up it later, we can do that, just to get going.
Let me clarify. When we publish the notice, that's going to be the maximum that you can do. You can't up that later unless you go through the whole process of creating a special service area again. So your maximum levy. So if you're going to say, if you want to start it out by saying $80,000, then you can do that, and we'll publish for the $80,000. But we can't say we're going to publish for $80,000 and go to $100,000. You can lower it, but you can't go higher.
Marty?
I would think since they're one of our stakeholders, they're stating that they're looking for up to $100,000. We honor that request. We start the process of directing staff to put it out at $100,000, knowing that it can go down if need be. I don't think we need to figure out what that exact number is amongst ourselves, because then we're trapping ourselves in positions before we have all the information. Sit down, come in with a clear mind, say we're looking for $100,000 based on what they initially feel that their reasonable needs are. They're justifying it to their other partner in it. They're justifying it to us. We will all sit together through the process and determine what that is when we make the resolution.
Okay, Scott?
Oh, Elliot was first.
Elliot, sorry.
I was just going to go back to Dan's question about holding line. I mean, if the question is, is the continuation of Main Street worth $40,000? Yes. If the question is the continuation of Main Street worth $100,000? Yes, but the question that I think we're trying to debate here is how do we position the longer-term play? And that's where I think we're going to find that we're probably not all in total agreement.
Agreed.
Well, and to that, the unlimited part, I don't have a problem with, because we can strike that down by ordinance. So, I mean, if Jamie and crew go off the reservation and, go nuts, we can yank it.
Terminate the ordinance.
Right.
Right.
That's why I make the motion.
Okay, we're directing staff, okay, so let's take a roll call on that, on the direction to staff to start the process of developing the new SSA 62 to fund Main Street operations with an unlimited end date as well as a $100,000 tax cap. Okay, so
move.
Second.
So motion by Callahan, second by Salvati. Take a voice vote, please, Jenny.
Callahan?
Aye.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Oh, right, roll call, sorry.
Malay absent. Ewer?
Aye.
Saron?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Rosado?
Aye.
Atack?
Aye.
Stark?
Aye.
Chanzit?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Salvati?
Aye.
Brown absent, and O'Brien.
Aye.
Okay,
Not consent agenda?
perfect.
Not consent agenda.
This is direction, because we actually have to go
This is
through and
just
do the
direction,
ordinances,
yeah.
so we don't need to take it to
No.
council at this point.
No.
So, thank you.
Uh-huh. Thank you, Scott, for your help on this.
Susan?
Yes.
Sorry, can we also, while we're still on this topic, maybe look to set a date to have staff come back about the EDC?
Yes.
And let's not just leave it to a whenever.
I agree.
Giddy up.
I agree.
I would need at least a month.
Okay, great.
Second.
Say June.
It's it, Jen.
I didn't say which one.
You got until June.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next thing under community development is the Main Street downtown wayfinding signs, which we have talked about a lot. We have been through this in terms of strategic plan. It started with the crummy signs on the outside of the edge of town. It went to full wayfinding. We talked about a new brand. We've been down this road. And so now Laura and Jamie will talk to us further about wayfinding.
Thank you.
Shall I? Okay, so this is just for discussion right now, just to throw this at you guys to start. It's in its very infant stages because there's been so many discussions, and obviously with all the processes that have been going on, we're at this point. So we've heard a call from our downtown business owners and different points of interest due to a lack of signage, particularly around the bike paths, because we have so much bike and pedestrian traffic growing. So we wanted to do a relatively small little signage project. The numbers come directly from the city. Just so that you guys know, our design committee is headed by Chris Cudworth, who is on your staff. So in partnership with him and with a wayfinding consultant, this is just a very, like I said, infant plan here. But this is kind of what we're looking at, 10 to 12 signs in the downtown area, working with the city staff for placement. We would fund this less than $2,000. We just kind of need some blessings from you guys to continue down this path, some conversations. They would be relatively generic. They wouldn't have specific businesses listed on them. We're not looking at doing a big directory or anything at this time because we want to make sure that once you guys get to the point of wanting to do more branding and permanent wayfinding and signage in downtown, that we can transition those out really easily. They wouldn't necessarily be green. That's all just to show you what's going on. So questions, thoughts,
Jamie,
feedback?
for the bike shop, don't we have a couple in town?
Yes. I'm not, again, this was kind of in partnership with a design consultant who was like looking at what our downtown businesses were and points of interest. So I think obviously it's more than the 4 signs. So it would be like bike shop this way, maybe a bike, maybe from the bike path on the other side, bike shop this way. You know, again, if you look on the map and those are just general areas, you can see that a lot of them flank the bike path and Riverwalk. So we're planning on it being people who are biking in from Elgin coming in, and if they need to get off the path and go pump up their tires or something.
Dan?
The DMV says they should be green, actually.
Oh,
Green
okay, well, good.
signage is guide signs, tell you where you are, which way you're going.
Well, that's why
That's
we're
why
talking to a wayfinding guy, not me.
Elliot?
Just because I work with two people and this always comes up, it's always the first thing on my mind. I agree with the green. The red is the one that concerns
Yeah.
me because the red and the green is the most typical colorblind
Oh,
pattern, and you can't see the red, and that affects a lot more people than people
Right.
believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could be white also. It could be whatever. I think that was just thrown on there for an example of what, I can hardly read it. So yes, I probably wouldn't go with red either.
Lucy?
You said these are going to be by the bike path?
Yeah.
One of the things that I find when I've said this before, but not to you, when I'm biking through town with people that have not been here, it's not clear where the bike path is.
Right.
Once you get by the depot or even on the other side, how do you get through town? And it would be nice to see signage that says bike path this where to connect.
Yeah. And, and I think those, again, depending on how in-depth we get, this is a less than $2,000 plan for now. I think we're not looking at investing a ton of money because sooner than later, hopefully there will be a look you guys want on signs in downtown and throughout the community. So I wouldn't want us to throw all that away. Which I don't know if those would be part of now or then, so
I don't know.
There's
I'm
going
just
to be more
saying
discussion.
people don't know how to get through town.
I agree. And
On the
more
bike.
than just the depot, there's points all over that you're
Right.
like, I don't know where I'm supposed to ride my bike.
Right. Confusing.
Jamie, would the expense for these signs be coming out of the money that you guys received as a grant for wayfinding, or are you asking for the city to pay for this?
No, we'd be paying for this.
Okay. Thank you. Marty, you had a question?
I just wanted to, who owns the bike path?
A couple
the park
different,
district, parts of it,
It's
the
a couple
city
different
owns,
entities.
and parts of it, the Forest Preserve owns.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why I don't think it's necessarily their responsibility to do that. I think we ought to make that request to the,
Sure.
the bike path and
But
make sure
they
that
probably,
You had a comment?
in response, they probably, I think it's up to us if we want the downtown to be a nice experience for people to direct them through town.
We own 50% of it.
Right, and that's my only point is, if it's a important deal for wayfinding, we shouldn't be asking them to do it. If we own 50% of it, we should get with the park district and make that happen.
And Katie, and we do have a member of the Park District staff working on this with us. I think this was our right now solution to something that we've been hearing for a really long time that's not progressing. And we wanted to take action in response to our business owners.
Mike?
I support it, and thank you for taking it on.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions of Jamie?
Let me just make one clarity here. When the city of Batavia entered into an agreement with Kane County in 1981, in the summer of 81, this came up because all of a sudden all these railroad right-of-ways in downtown were being abandoned. And the proposal was that the city pay for half of it and the county would pay for the other half, and the county would build a bike trail on it. And the idea why the city council jumped at the idea is that it gives us a clear, unobstructed right-of-way from Fabian Parkway down to Mooseheart Road, which either on the east or the west side of the community gets us right next to the sewer plant. And if the day comes and someday in the future when we need to have some line put into the sewer plant or whatever have you, we just go down, bring the line down to that right-of-way and just go north or south into the connection into the sewer plant. So the city engineering firm at the time, was our advisor, was very highly recommending that this was the golden opportunity, that we should not pass that by and that we should retain that ownership of that right-of-way, just for grins of it, if the day comes that we need the ownership of a right-of-way. And with the annexation of the Mooseheart property, there's still huge amounts of work that would have to be done on that someday. But that could be, at one point, that could be something that right-of-way could be of value to us. So I wouldn't want to give it to the park district, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, I don't think we're saying give that to the park district. It was making sure that, to Lucy's point about getting the signs, let's make sure we just get the signs that are out there, that we move that along, that if that's a hindrance, we shouldn't be asking you for it. If we can have staff come back and just say this is, or it sounds like a project maybe for the bike commission, tell us where are the signs needed, bring a solution as to where the signs are needed, and figure out and have staff let us know where the signs need to go.
I think they just want to get done with it.
Yeah, that's
You know?
kind of where we're
So
at.
let's just go. Let's go
Sorry.
make it.
It's more we just want this to be done.
So,
Yeah.
I guess you're just looking for our approval to start this process.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Okay.
didn't want to dig any further.
That's fine.
If it
So-
wasn't going to be a good thumbs up.
Let's take a vote on this.
We need a motion.
We need a motion.
Second.
Are you looking for a motion?
Sure, it's just
Yeah.
She has to have one.
Discussion.
It's just discussion.
It's just discussion.
Just discussion?
Just one.
So,
Head nods.
okay. Have at it.
It's my money, right? Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so I'm developing a sick headache before this next one. Thanks, Scott, for coming on up. This is with regard to the public hearings from the Plan Commission on the 7th and 21st of March to review a number of amendments to the text of the zoning code. And so the amendment would address issues staff has encountered in administering the code and to better allow or regulate improvements. The proposed changes include aligning residential density language, updating amenity thresholds for multifamily developments, specifications for government offices and smoking lounges in commercial zoning districts, and requirements for wireless communications facilities. And so there's quite a bit of background here, and Scott can speak to it. You don't need me to read all of this, but I can get to the pros as we go further in this discussion. The pros of this, approving the ordinance 1823 would align certain zoning code language with the comprehensive plan and better regulate certain commercial and government uses. Amendments to the WCF regulation would allow for additional installation locations on taller buildings where WCF would be screened from view. The cons, not approving this ordinance would leave some zoning code language inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, continue to permit government offices on commercially zoned property that could be available for sales tax producing businesses, and continue to prohibit the WCF installations on some taller buildings. The budget impact on this, of course, is none. The staff impact is none other than the time it's taking staff to fix this or get it more clear. Timeline for actions with a COW recommendation. This would be going on the agenda on May 7th. The recommendation from the Plan Commission, it was a vote of 4-2, so it was a split vote. The Plan Commission recommended approval of the zoning code text amendment as presented in Ordinance 1823. And staff recommends that 1823 is approved as presented. So now, Scott, you've got the middle 2 pages.
Yeah, so essentially, this is another round of the text amendments that we normally do as part of our review of the zoning code. When we find things that are deficient or things that need to be looked at in more detail, we make proposals to do those things. So this happens to be another one of those things. So this one combines a number of things and tries to make some corrections for things that we saw are deficiencies in the zoning code. So the first item is the general residential density ranges. That's kind of a clerical thing more than anything. It just makes sure that there's some actual density ranges for the multifamily different types of districts in the zoning code. The other is regarding enclosed community building and tot lot and multifamily developments. Right now, the minimum size is 100 units to require tot lot. We're proposing it to be 200 or more units. So it just seems like that some of the developments that, in my experience, I've had won't support some of these types of facilities if the development is too small. So we're proposing to change that to 200 as opposed to 100 units. The other change that we're proposing is government offices and facilities in the general commercial district. Right now, they are permitted use. There's been some concern. The real-life example is the Sam's Club building, and whether or not somebody from a government agency would be interested in doing that, aka Montgomery Ward in St. Charles. So we wanted to take that out as a permitted use in that district, and so government uses could not be allowed in the general commercial district. Another change is smoking lounges in single-tenant buildings. This is kind of an outcropping from the state regulations of smoking lounges. They are supposed to be in a freestanding building and not in a multi-tenant building, so this clarifies that particular issue in the code. And then the other part is the biggest part, and this is the issue that, this is the section that the Plan Commission had concerns with. Some of the plan commissioners, I should say, had concerns with is changes to the wireless communication facilities on taller buildings. The idea behind this, and to be honest, this was kind of pointed out to us as part of the Campana project, that it was a potential issue. But right now, we do not allow for antennas to be on any building that is residential in nature. All it has to be is one unit, and that is considered a residential building. So we felt that that was not necessarily what we wanted to do, and wanted to clarify the regulations in regards to that. There are buildings all over Chicagoland that have wireless communication facilities on residential buildings. I myself lived in one at one point in time. It is, you know, a way to put antennas up without having to have freestanding poles in other locations. So we felt that as long as they are stealth and they are disguised, that it would be, an allowable use. It should be an allowable use in residential districts. So we've done is put that in the DMU district so that one Washington Place, for example, could have antennas on it when it's built. Assuming it gets built, and also the R5 and mixed-use districts as well. So depending on the height of the building, they would potentially be able to have them. We have a 35-foot high minimum height that is required, so that you can't have them on, like Batavia apartments. Those would be too short, so you would not be able to have it on those types of installations. But we wanted to try and address that, making sure that they're stealths, making sure that they are, hidden in some manner, whether it be a stealth building installation or on top of the roof, that type of thing. So that is a really quick summary of what the changes are, and we're welcome to comments on that.
Scott, when it comes to the cell phone towers, if it's a commercial building, so let's say the Aldi building came to us and said we want to sell our roof rights.
Mm-hmm.
If they met all of the criteria in terms of height of building, et cetera, we would be able to approve that.
Correct.
Okay, so this is
Similar-
solely residential.
This is just for the residential part. So Campana, for example, is commercial building, mixed-use building. Right now, it's because there's no residences, they are allowed to have antennas on their building. So, and I just use that as an example, not for anything that's coming. But if Aldi wanted to put antennas on their building, they could certainly do that as well.
I was just trying to think of the tallest building in town I could think of, so I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Marty?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with any of these except for the cell tower ones. And I think I'm taking my thoughts about it from the way Tom Lalonde and I think it was Gene Schneider, their concern about it, the health risk issues. So I'm looking at it from a public safety and welfare issue. This is on residential. I know that the refrain has been that we can't mention anything about denying it based on the 1996 Telecommunications Act, Section 704. But that's only about denying an application for one going in. If we change our laws to allow it, then we could no longer ask about it. It is denied right now for residential areas. It also states, if your city council takes too much time processing a telecom corporation application to install equipment, then a corporation can sue your city. That is absolutely correct, but that is not this scenario. So it's apples and oranges. We are not talking about denying a specific request because, number one, there isn't one before us, and number two, it doesn't matter anyways because the intent of what we've been thinking isn't that a telecommunications company can come in and say, I demand to put a tower on Dan's house, on this type of building wherever there's residential. That's not the intent of it. We're already covered because we're saying it was already a banned zoning. So we can speak to that as a zoning issue. Even if we did repeal it, according to the TCA, your town can only refuse to permit installation of a wireless equipment if it does not like how the antenna looks. So we could do the screening, that's where we would have authority. or if the equipment's presence or appearance decreases the property values. Now, on that issue alone, we don't have enough information. Because if you go to the National Realtors Association and look up cell tower antennas, there are at least 27 articles about how residential property values are impacted. So as a con, we should be weighing what are the public safety health risks, because there's numerous studies about there. You don't have to believe something. You're going to have people believing pros and cons, but that's where we are allowed to weigh it, because we still can weigh it because we don't have one before us requesting or putting us in that position of denying it. I would hate that we repealed something and then a very compelling argument or study is made that says, oh my God, some of the court cases that are out there since all of these things have been, we're talking 1996, there are many court cases that are currently pending before the United States Supreme Court and that have been kicked back that are in conflict with the ADA Act. People that have sensitivities to electrical interference, those things are working its way through the court. So while we're not dealing with anything pressing, I think we should wait to see what some of these court cases say, wait to find out some of how, get us more time to read the pros and cons in some of these articles, because I'm not going to sit here and read all these points in. I think you guys should read them for yourself, because there's a lot of compelling information from 2017, 2016, very recent studies where it will impact. And if we're not even considering that in our con, we're not making an informed decision. Because right now, we would be considering waiving a protection that we have in place for our residents. And to Lucy's point, we have all these laws in the books for reasons. And when we're looking to change them, we can do that. But I think we should do that from a more informed position than we have currently before us. So I think it was Tom Lalonde's suggestion, pull this one out by itself. Nothing's pressing, act on the other ones, and give this the due consideration that it's owed.
Mark?
I agree with everything you just said there, Marty. I mean, that's what I would go with, is we need to pull it out and concentrate on the others, because I don't have a problem with the others. We are on the verge of 5G, and we have no idea what that impact is really going to be. We don't even know if there's a demand. Are we having anybody ask us?
No, not currently,
Okay.
no.
So we're solving a problem that may not really exist. I know we can say that there's more need for wireless communication, but right now, we don't have an issue.
Laura?
So the reason why we're bringing it to you now is because when it was raised during the Campana project, it was said we shouldn't decide this while we have a project before us. So we're trying to make those decisions prior to the next one coming to us so that somebody doesn't have to come in either seeking a variance or they'll know that they already comply with what our zoning code is.
I totally understand that, but that's one part of the Campana saga. So I don't know that, I don't want to make a decision now because I don't think we have enough evidence. I mean, back to Marty's point, I mean, 5G is coming. We don't know what that impact is going to be. There's articles out there that say all those that are going up, there is an increase because they are putting them up in California right now, and there's potential problems. But every article that says there's a problem, there's an article that says there's not. So again, we're going to have to weigh that, but I don't, if you want to say the problem we're solving is so we don't have this in the middle of another project, I get that. But all that's going to do is set us up to say, oh, yep, we just said there could be one on one Washington gets built, and there's cell towers up there. And then now we've caused a problem for our citizens from a public health issue, if there is a public health issue.
See?
Since we have Fermilab in town and they do a lot of basic science research, instead of looking online for information, I would hope that we could ask some of the scientists there that could come and talk to us about this. I guess I think that cell towers can add value to some buildings because they add income. And, from what I've heard, there are a lot of scare tactics out there, and a lot of people are really concerned about this because they don't completely understand it, but there's not much to it. So I guess I would like to hear, instead of looking online and comparing facts, to have an expert address what they feel about cell towers.
Yeah, and just so you know, I mean, if we're trying to decide on a specific installation on whether or not it's safe or not, we're preempted by FCC from making a decision based on that. But just so you probably are aware of this, or maybe you're not, but there was a state law that was signed by the governor just recently that basically is preempting us from regulating small cell wireless. So what's going to be happening is you're going to get these cell companies now basically putting new cell broadcast antennas on the power lines in front of power poles in front of your house, because we can't regulate them. We're being preempted from that. So those are going to be right there, and that's the new technology. That's kind of the 5G thing that's coming, and there's nothing we can do about it because the state has basically taken away all of our authority to do that.
Mike, you had a question?
So, a couple of questions. I guess at the Plan Commission meeting, there was some, holdback on that. People still had some questions, and it got pushed to us right away. Why'd that happen? Why didn't we just keep it at Plan Commission so they could fully vet it? Second question is, Marty had said that, if we already have an ordinance in place where we can't put this up so the FCC has no say in the matter, why would we open ourselves up to the FCC mandating us? And then the third question is Marty just gave a list of negative impacts. Why are they not on this? In your, you gave the pros of a positive vote and a negative vote, the cons. I mean, we don't. Cons as well, it's just not going to follow the ordinance or follow the comprehensive plan. It's just, why would we have further things listed, like further reading or something?
Right.
I guess, so we can get a full picture of what it is we're doing. And so I guess there are three questions. I think they're important questions. And I think, why are we discussing it now if the Plan Commission hasn't fully vetted it?
Right. Well, the Plan Commission, first of all, they're looking at whether or not it's a change to the zoning code or not. And, the zoning code has certain limitations on what it can do and can't do. So, they had reviewed it, and, they ended up taking a vote. I think there was the thought it was going to be a tie vote, but it ended up being 4-2 in favor of what was being requested. So, just like any other item that's in front of them, they vote and they decided, whether or not to forward it on to the city council, or if they wanted to table it, they certainly could have tabled it, but they elected not to. So, as to the pros and cons, we try as best as we can to list the various pros and cons. If we listed every single pro and every single con on every single item, we'd have a huge staff report. So certainly, the research, for other things that are not related to specific zoning ordinance related changes, that kind of gets outside the bounds of some of the things that we would normally provide, I guess. So.
Anyone else on the council have any questions? Comments from the audience? Does anyone in the audience have anything they want to say about this? Okay. Marty?
Yeah, I just want to, and it's kind of still back along the point that Mike said, is this isn't just a pro and con situation. This is a codified law that was vetted before, that made its way to being passed. And when we're talking about respecting the rule of law, you respect the rule of law when they're created, and you change bad laws when they're necessary. But if not, then you have to really make sure that you frankly do have all the pros and all the cons in those situations, because you're going against decisions that have already been vetted and made. And we should be having more compelling new information as to why we're just getting rid of it now. I'm sorry, instead of just sales tax producing businesses. That said nothing about resident impact. What is the impact to residents? I don't care about overturning or changing laws that we have on the books based purely on a financial decision. When we're talking about RFs and the federal government doesn't want us to talk about certain things for reasons to protect the interests of the telecom companies. But there is other information that is available to us online, in person, from other people that brought it to the last meetings that are in the packet, that if you don't look at that and it doesn't give you pause on some level, that we're allowing our ability to no longer prevent the possibility of that firefighter study.
Laura?
I just wanted to acknowledge that it wasn't just economic impact and that there was health information provided, because I wouldn't have gotten that from how you began that comment. It seemed like you were saying staff was only providing economic information.
No, what I'm saying is when we're saying total cons, we're wanting to make sure what are the reasonable cons to it. A quick search of it always shows health risks and property values. That's not listed as a con when all the literature is going back and forth about it. The health risks will always be, like Mark said, you're going to find one study that says it's fine, you're going to say one study that says it's not fine. The con that was consistent is tons of studies are out there going way back that it affects property values. That is a potential huge con that we should at least be addressing for our residents, because if we're still debating health, can't debate health, that's one thing. We can talk about property values, and we can talk about the residential impact on that. And that is a huge research point that we should have knowledge and should be considering.
Lucy?
Are these cell towers that are impacting single-family residential? What kind of property values are they impacting?
There are all sorts of studies that are out there about, and that's why I'm saying there are 27 studies out there that give different points of view on it. But all the commonality that it has on it, they are put out, as they say, we've done the research for you from the National Realtors Association of America. Not
like multifamily, or are we talking multifamily, or like?
It talks about several of them, where people are in relation to them, where it talks about the polls. All I'm saying is we should have, on an important issue like this, when we're overturning rules and laws, think about it first. If it has a bunch of ones that are about single family, maybe you weigh it, maybe you don't. But that goes to each and our individual responsibility to make sure that you're making an informed decision. We can agree or disagree on the information that's presented, but if we're not even talking about it, how do we know amongst ourselves? It's always best to have the information, read it, become more knowledgeable so that we're more informed about our decisions that are overturning someone else's decision.
Mike?
So there's the Firefighters Association, American Firefighters Association, dead set against this. Okay, they have this whole packet you gave us, half of it was their study. Okay, and then I went to the Cancer Society, and they say there's no damage at all. There's nothing to worry about. More damage done, talking on your cell phone. That to me says we're not done yet in vetting out the harmful effects, because we still don't know. There's nothing definitive saying this is what it is. And so with that being said, we're going to put these towers into residential areas, and we don't know what the negative effects are going to be. And again, my social conscience then comes up, and We, as a municipal government, a local government, we care about the citizenry of our community, okay? State, not so much, okay? Federal government, not at all, okay? And we have the FCC telling us what we can and cannot do then, health-wise, okay? Now, I don't know who the head of the FCC is, but if he's anything like, say, a Scott Pruitt with the EPA, well, he's gutting all the rules that protect people, that protect our environment. So I just have concerns about that, and I think we need to be acting more responsibly towards the health and welfare of our residents. And not that staff is not, I don't mean to imply that, but it's not confirmed, it's not definitive yet what the health ramifications are.
Ellie?
And that's
sorry.
where I'm at with that.
I agree with, this is the piece for me that I found myself rereading and struggling with why we would look to make any sort of these changes that are being outlined here. To a couple of the points that I've heard here, if we're going to change one of our own laws, codes, that's on the books, there ought to be very compelling examples and reasons and justification for why we're making that change. And to Mark's point, just taking the example of California, but even if you look back, over time, technology is going to move a heck of a lot faster than any law, than any level of government. Right now, we have something in here that is allowing us kind of a preemptive shield, if you will, a moat from that. And why we would look to remove that, I'm not okay with, at least after all my mental back and forth.
So it's not, because the cool kids have it? You don't want to?
I don't care what the cool kids have.
Yeah.
If we take this out of the ordinance and go ahead and approve the rest of it, just so I'm clear, if a developer does show up on our doorsteps and they do have a plan and it does include a cell tower, then they're just asking us for a variance, and we can make a decision on a case-by-case basis if we want to allow this to happen, right?
Yeah, either a variance or a text amendment, depending on, what it is and where they're proposing it. So, yeah, so for example, right now, just keep using Campanas because we're going to keep using it as an example.
We voted 8-6 against it. I distinctly remember that when we made that punch list. So politically, it's not feasible right now.
Right. So, if somebody wanted to put an antenna on let's use One Washington, for example. Let's say that building gets built, they want to put something on there. Right now, the ordinance says that you cannot put any antennas on a residential building. So if they wanted to do that, they would have to get some type of a variance or text amendment to the code in order to actually put that up. So they would have to get special permission from the city council, plan commission and city council to do that right now.
Lucy?
I want to say when I suggested we have a scientist come and speak that knows something about this, I'm throwing it out there because I kind of have some experience with this. I'm a member in a building, and we have several cell towers on the building, and we make a lot of income annually as a result of this. It's very nice. And we have done a lot of research on the impact of this to the health of the people in the building because we have family members working there. So, from my perspective, I've talked to scientists and I feel pretty comfortable with it. So I feel like it would be helpful to have someone come here and address the council. And because, the American Cancer Society is pretty up to date on research. But I agree that there is a ton of stuff on the web, but it's really hard to sort through what is fact and what is fiction and what is paid for and what isn't and all that sort of thing.
True?
Yeah, I think Lucy kind of touched a little bit on what I was thinking and the disconnect I have, which is why it's okay to have cell towers on an office building that's occupied 12, 14, 16, 24 hours a day, depending on the place, and why that would be different on top of an apartment building. It's a disconnect. I can't square it up.
Alan?
I'd like to suggest that we just remove this from that, pass the rest of the ordinance, get the rest of the questions answered that we all have, and then make a decision on the cell tower part of it. Because if we don't, we're going to sit here and talk for another hour about this, and everybody's going to air everything that we need to talk about, and yet we're not going to make a decision on the ordinance that's before us.
Okay. And Laura?
I would like to consider maybe just taking that portion of it out, because putting it on staff to present you with an expert that you all agree upon has the be-all, end-all answer to the health question about radio frequency, I think is an impossible task.
Yeah, and if I'll echo that, I mean, I would suggest at this point that probably the best thing to do would be to just excise that part from the ordinance, have you, act on the rest of it, and then we'll go back and, digest that a little bit more and, figure out whether or not we want to consider, proceeding with something additional, or maybe we'll wait until somebody does propose something when Washington or somebody else comes forward with a proposal, so.
Great. There's the gentleman behind you had wanted to speak, and we rudely kept talking. So if you'd like to come up, sir, and address the council,
I don't know if it
state
was
your
rudely.
name, that would be great.
I don't think it was rude at all.
Okay, great.
But I don't think
come up to the microphone,
I don't think
please.
I need to I don't think I need to make a comment this evening, because I think I know the way the vote's going to go. So if it doesn't go the way I think it's going to go, I'll speak at the city council meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so any other discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Mike?
We kind of just went right over everything else and got right to the meat of the WCU. So I guess I have a question for you regarding the earlier ordinances, okay? Like the 200 residents. We have an ordinance now that says 100 units, we have to build a building. And now we're changing it. Why? I understand the economies of scale.
Yeah.
But has it worked in the past?
We really haven't had any projects really where it would have applied directly recently. But we have projects that are coming forward now. Prairie Commons is one that, if there weren't an annexation agreement, they would have had to provide some type of facility. We're going to have the Landmeyer Farm property coming forward, where if this is in place, they would potentially have to have some type of facility. So, usually developers say they want to have, at least in the case of townhomes or apartments, they want to have at least 200 units before it supports itself for some type of a recreation facility or clubhouse or things like that. So that's been my experience. The 200 is more of a regular threshold that they really follow.
Then why did we have 100? If 200's...
That's before my time when they drafted the ordinance. I'm not sure. It might have followed an earlier ordinance that they echoed. I'm not sure.
Okay, I just don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to have a building.
Mm-hmm.
At 100 units, that's a lot of units. It'd be nice to have a building.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we want the developers to come into our town, absolutely. But they make a lot of money, and they can make a lot more money that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, with the tot lot, you're putting it to 100 units, then they have to put in a tot lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was 75 units, no tot lot?
Correct. They'd still have to pay land cash towards the park district. So if the park district wanted to establish an actual park, that still would apply, obviously, if they felt that they wanted to do that. And that's kind of, using Prairie Commons as an example. The developer, after discussions and negotiations, they elected to actually provide a park site for it, based on the number of units, and that offsets their land cash donation that they would have. So it just seems that provides more. It's more supportable when you have a larger number like that.
And then, if I may, Susan.
Yeah, of course.
You have the second item, specifications for government offices and smoking lounges in commercial zoning districts. The government offices, I fully agree with that. They're taxing bodies, so they don't get taxed.
Right.
And so we don't do that. We know better. Correct? I would think our municipal staff knows not to do something like that. How about the other taxing bodies like the park district, the library? Mostly, I guess, would be the park district or the school district.
Yeah, well, unfortunately,
Does this control any of that?
it controls some of it, yes. I mean, if another governmental body wanted to come in there if we change this and another governmental body wanted to come in there, we'd be able to say, no, that's not a permitted use.
And this is a good thing to do.
Correct. That's how we feel it
Absolutely.
is, yes.
I just know in Oak Park, on Oak Park Avenue, it's a nice commercial district, and their park district bought a building, a whole building.
Right.
And just the loss of income was incredible to them. But
And let me two things with that, though. A real-life example that we had here in town was the school district buying that building on Main Street for a maintenance facility. That was a permitted use in that district, so there was nothing that could be done to stop them from doing that. We also cannot stop the federal government and state government from putting in facilities. So if the state wanted to come in and put a prison or something like that, we wouldn't be able to stop them from that.
Okay. Well, we'd have to have good lawyers.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that, I would support that.
Dan?
Regarding the amenities portion, PUD is not included in that. I ask because my neighborhood has like 168 units, and we don't have a building, but then again, we're also not paying for it in our association.
You predated the changes to the zoning code. So the zoning code, the current zoning code was adopted in 2010, so it predated that.
And if you were to do PUDs, you might be able to still avoid it?
You could potentially avoid that, yeah. I mean, you could ask for that as a modification to the plan development ordinance, yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Then would someone like to make some form of a motion? Alan?
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend council ordinance 18-23, amending the text of the zoning code, City of Batavia applicant, and remove the changes to chapter 4.7, wireless communication facilities.
Second.
Motion by Wolf, second by Callahan. Please take a roll call.
Wolf,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan.
Aye.
Heitzler,
Aye.
Malay absent, Ewer,
Aye.
Saron,
Aye.
McFadden,
No.
Rosado,
Aye.
Atack,
Aye.
Stark,
Aye.
Chanzit,
No.
and Salavati.
Aye.
Brown absent, 10 to 1.
Okay.
Wait,
10 to 2.
10
10
to
to
2.
10 to 2.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, 10 to 2.
Okay, and so this will go on the regular agenda? Thank you. And the next thing is Vacation Island, which is what it says in the, I was like, where is Vacation Island in town? How did I miss that we have Vacation Island in Batavia? Actually, it's the vacation of the old Island Avenue right-of-way. And so Scott has been working with the Park District to resolve some land issues around City Hall and the Peg Bond Center. One of the issues relates to the old Island Avenue right-of-way. This right-of-way was deeded to the Park District sometime in the 1990s. It was never formally vacated as a right-of-way. To clear up the title on the property, it's recommended that we vacate it back to the Park District. And we have utilities that run through this area, so we would reserve an easement over the vacated area for access and maintenance. And staff and Park District staff are also working on a land swap of various parcels in the City Hall and Peg Bond Center area. This will be coming forward to the council as a separate action in the near future. Any land swap will require passage of an ordinance and a resolution, as well as approval of a plat of subdivision to allocate the properties to the city and the Park District. So our alternatives are to vacate Island Avenue with reservation of drainage, utility, and access easements, or do not vacate Island Avenue. The pros are vacating the alley would clear up potential title issue with the area, as it has already been deeded to the Park District some time ago. It would clarify that the city has no ownership or maintenance responsibility for this area. There are no cons. The vacation of it would cost about $300 for plat preparation and recording costs. There's no staffing impact. The timeline for action, it doesn't have a specific timeline, but the vacation is necessary before any land swap can be taken. Staff recommends approval of this. And Scott, the map is very hard to read.
Yes.
In terms of where it is. Can you really point out where this land is that we're
Yes.
vacating?
So where the hand is here on the map is Island Avenue as it exists today. So the parking in front of this is City Hall right here. This is the parking. This is the roundabout. And then this is the back parking lot for City Hall. This grayed area is actually where Island Avenue legally is.
Oh.
So that actually provided the original access to River Rain and so on and so forth. And we have water and sewer and electric utilities that run in that original right-of-way. It's only a 30-foot wide right-of-way. So in the 90s, we actually deeded this land to the Park District, but we didn't formally vacate it. So there's still kind of a cloud on this land because we haven't formally vacated it for right-of-way purposes. So in advance of the other land swap things that we're working on with the Park District, we needed to vacate this formally so that it's now in the Park District's hands officially and that there's no right-of-way on top of it. And then, as I had mentioned in my staff report, we'll be coming forward to you later on with an ordinance and resolution that will start the swap process. The Park District will have to do the exact same thing, and then we'll have a plat in front of the Plan Commission, and then eventually you that actually completes the land swap process. So it's a multi-step process here, and it's a little complex when we have to do some of these things, but that's just the way we're required to do land swaps and things.
Anybody have any questions about the land swap?
I would move we approve ordinance 1827.
Second.
Motion by Saron, second by O'Brien. Was it O'Brien? To approve the ordinance.
Could have been anybody.
Thumbs
Could
up
have been
by
any boy,
O'Brien.
male
Thumbs
voice
up.
over there. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And I think community development is done, Alan.
Going
Can
consent.
that go on consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Up next is Resolution 18-53-R, adopting City of Batavia debt management policy. Lucy?
Yes, we received a memo from Peggy. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends that cities adopt a formal debt management policy, which Peggy has written and recommended, and also a resolution. We know that we've been very conservative with our debt issuance. I think we also know that given all our infrastructure improvements that are looming, that we may have to issue more debt in the future, and we also recognize that sometimes debt financing can be useful. So with all those things, staff is recommending that we approve Resolution 18-53-R, City of Batavia Debt Management Policy. Would you, does anyone have any questions for Peggy? Nick?
I was just going to say that these are based on what the association recommended. Was there anything in there that threw you for a loop or that you're not currently following?
No, they've recommended that everyone have a debt policy for some time. I've had it on my list of things to do, and I started writing it last year. And now they just came up with an additional best practice, and that is something that I added into this particular policy because I used Naperville's as a starting point, and they didn't have that additional one in there, and that was on primary market disclosure, in making sure that investors in our bonds have all of the information that they need when purchasing our debt. So that was really the only new item in the policy, and then I just tailored it to the city of Batavia specifically.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
What's a negotiated sale?
And that's when you do a sale directly with a bank, usually. We did have, normally our sales are competitively bid. Since I've been here, I think we did have one negotiated sale several years ago.
And who is our financial advisor?
We've had Spear Financial for many years.
Okay, and our bond advisor is?
Chapman and Cutler is the bond counsel.
Thank you.
Dan, thank you.
I almost don't know how to ask this question because I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but had this policy been in place 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, do you think it would have had any impact on any debt issuance decisions that we have made at all?
No, and if you're specifically asking about Prairie State, without saying it, no. In fact, I was not involved in any of that debt issuance, and
I read the verbiage. I was looking for a thing in here, a trigger for a thing that stops something. I didn't see that, but what I saw were very sound financial policies.
we don't issue any debt without the council's approval. And what was unusual about the Prairie State debt is that NIMPA was able to issue it on their own.
Yes. Thank you.
Laura? I'm sorry.
Susan. That's okay. Scott and Dave. These are just two weird little housekeeping things, Peggy. Sure. For some unknown reason, the first line under purpose and goals is indented and nowhere else is. And then under C, capital improvement program, the first line of that also has a weird indent that.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll fix that.
Thank you. I'm that girl.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Make a motion, we recommend the city council passage of resolution 18-53-R, City of Batavia Debt Management Policy for April 24th.
Second.
Meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
I think that can go on consent agenda unless there's any reason why it shouldn't.
Next up is item number 12, resolution 18-52-R, approval of an employment agreement for Jeanette Armbrust.
Yes, this is good news, I think. This is from Wendy, and she's asking that we approve a part-time employment agreement for Jeanette so she can stick around and help out a little bit when needed on certain projects and maybe do a little training too. So do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I'll just quickly. This is a part-time agreement that's going to be limited based on the most that she can work is 599 hours a year. So it'll be on a very limited basis, if you can imagine, if you split that out. And primarily the intent was, of course, to help through the transition. Karen's doing great, but as you can imagine, it takes a full year before you find out what you don't know, kind of a thing. And then additionally, to help with some of the archiving of some just institutional things that we have and projects. So she'll be she already has that knowledge. She can come in and get those things accomplished for us.
Are there any questions or comments?
I think it's parking.
Yeah, is 599 a special number?
Yeah, it's actually her pension number, IMRF. So prior to, oh gosh, I don't remember the year. If you were hired prior to 1993, I think it is. I can't remember the year exactly. The most that you can work is 599. If you're hired after that, it's actually 1,000 hours. So you'll see that. But
okay. All right, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on
Sorry.
to number 13, project status.
Okay. Based on last week's communication about, under other, about power outage communications, the communications coordinator, the Public Works Department, and police and fire departments met to talk about how we could better communicate with residents in those situations. And the only clerical department that we have here at the city that is 24/7 is the police records department. And so we've worked on providing those, we'll be providing those employees with access to the website to allow them to post in the event of a power outage. And posting on the homepage of the website automatically pushes that out to make a Facebook post and a Twitter post. So it's a good start. We will continue to look at technology platforms such as Nextel that other communities are using that send out text messages directed at certain segments of the community, depending upon, what those issues are. But we thought that this is something that we could put in place immediately to respond to that concern. Alderman Ure?
I meant to email you on this. Have we talked with the school board about sharing that cost? Because I know the system we use at work, we have different administrators, so different people can send different messages and have different access to a different group of people. And it might be something that we could leverage.
I'll do that. We have received 875 survey responses, so we're still short of the 1,000 response target that I've got, but I'm hopeful that if we keep publicizing it, that we'll continue to get people to respond. Also, the Illinois Commerce Commission has approved Suncast requests to rebuild the rail spur that'll deliver materials to their Suncast Lane facility. So we continue to cooperate with them on bringing that rail spur online, which will allow them to significantly ramp up the production that they're doing at that facility, along with the electrical improvements that we've been talking about in some prior meetings here. Plan Commission on May 2nd will have hearings on the proposed expansion of the Funway Entertainment Facility on South River Road and variances for the Metronet Hub on Orion Road and Nagel Boulevard. Kane County has notified us of the opening of the application period for the 2018 Community Development Block Grant Program. We will be submitting an application for streets in the vicinity of North River Street. We have, on 2 recent occasions, been awarded grants that allowed us to do some road work and some sidewalk replacements on our east side. Also, on the communications front, the Batavia Public Library Board in May will be considering an intergovernmental agreement that's drafted for the purpose of allowing the city of Batavia to use the library's original content on the history and collection of the windmills in our city. And allowing use of that content will allow Chris to put together information that will be a walking tour of those windmills. In last week's meeting, I mentioned that Francine Popick, Bob Popick's wife, is moving out of the area and is wanting to know if the city would be interested in purchasing their collection of 3 windmills, which are currently installed in their backyard. One of those is an Appleton windmill, which was produced right here in this very building. And then the other 2 are a Challenge 27 and a Challenge Big Spear Model 1913. Ms. Popick is offering those to the city at a cost of $11,375, which is in each case at least $1,000 less than the amount that she has had those windmills previously appraised for. So at our next week's Committee of the Whole meeting, I will be proposing that we purchase that collection of windmills from her. That's all that I have, unless anybody has questions about
Any questions?
I just have a comment. I just want to congratulate the staff on the world's fastest traffic study and approval from the state on having our speed limits reduced.
It's that man right there.
Right.
That was amazing.
Mayor sends a letter and speed limits change.
Was there more than one sign put up?
Yes, there's, I think on either side of that zone, there's a 30 at McKee and there's a 30 at North.
Now we need to write a letter for Millview into the.
Yeah, we got a lot of letters.
Working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Working on it.
Fabian.
Right one for Aldrin too, I suppose.
Letter worked.
The power of the
Ellen,
word.
I have, on behalf of the Bike Commission, Joanne Spitz has asked me to invite all the aldermen to Bike to School Day on Wednesday, May 9th. And she would like it if you can go to any of the elementary schools, obviously probably one in your ward, between 8:45 and 9, and I high-five the kids and say good job for biking or walking to school. And ideally, you will have ridden your bike there.
Can it be a motorized bike?
It's a long way.
So again, that's Wednesday, May 9th is walk or bike to school day. And at the elementary schools, the kids will be arriving around 8:45.
I move we
Put it on
adjourn.
the calendar. Have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wow. Go home.